Multi-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostic alongside Scarlett Fu. We're counting you down to the closing bell, and here to help take us beyond the bell. It's a global simulcast with our friends Carol Masser and Bailey Lipschultz in today for Tim Stenovic. Welcome to our audiences across our Bloomberg Television, radio, and originals platforms, as well as our partnership. Carol, for those folks streaming on YouTube.
Yeah, for everybody who's out there, what a week it's been. It's really been about the rate environment this week, capped off by Jay Powell making some comments today that really makes it feel like pivot. Anyone, and that the Fed is maybe done. It'll make that meeting that's coming up in December even more interesting. Having said that, Bailey, we're looking at a broad-based rally today.
Broad-based rally, you're seeing the equal-weighted S&P outperforming the overall S&P by about 3 times, up 1.5% on the equal-weighted. So it does seem like we're seeing that breadth that analysts and investors have really been pounding the table for after months of Magnificent Seven being the only thing in town, the only thing really rallying.
Yeah, and almost 8 stocks higher for everyone that is down on the New York Stock Exchange. But really, if you chart it out, the outperformer on the day is the Russell 2000, up by almost 3%, getting ready to close out its 3rd straight weekly gain and 4th weekly gain in 5.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was also taking a look at the S&P 400 mid caps, which are also on a massive rally on the day, up 2.5%. We're talking about technical levels that have now been breached to the upside for all of these major indices here. And it really gets to the question right now about the legs for this rally and what the next catalyst could be.
Yeah, and if you're a technician right now, you're looking at something like the relative strength index on the S&P 500, and you're like, we are overbought in a big way, overbought in a big way. And so you do wonder whether or not we take a little bit of a breather at some point here.
Yeah, and we should point out, at least with the Russell and the mid caps, they're not quite into overbought territory, so maybe this is a little bit of course correcting from what we saw in the belly of the year. Let's walk you through the numbers here on the first trading day of December, last trading day of the week, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average higher by 294 points or 0.8%. The S&P 500 higher by about 27 points or 0.6%. A similar percentage move for the NASDAQ Composite, and as we were just talking about, the Russell 2000 going to close out the day higher by 3%.
I dare say Santa Claus rally, but maybe that's just too early. Let's not go there yet. Having said that, we talked about it being a broad-based rally on this Friday, Scarlett, and so we are looking at most names in the S&P 500, 437 gaining ground on this Friday, 65 to the downside, 1 unchanged.
And that is echoed in the sector performances as well. 24 industry groups. You've got 5 that are in the red, so that's
after last month's massive solar flare added a 25th hour to the day, businesses are wondering, what should we do?
3 months. And then the real estate investment trusts, which have done pretty well, up by more than 2%. On the downside, marginal losses in media and entertainment, insurance, and software and services.
All right, guys, let's get to some of the individual gainers, if I may, in the Friday trade. Altimmune is certainly a standout. At its highs today, up almost 86%. This after the drug developer gave top-line results from a mid-stage trial of its investigative GLP-1 therapy to treat obesity. Interesting. I'm kind of all in on small caps today, and this is certainly one of them. Jeffrey's calling the data solid. Stock did end the day, though, way off its highs of the session, still with about a 13% gain. Got another small cap for you. We're talking about the retailer Zumiez. Am I saying it right?
Zoomies.
I get it wrong every time.
Carol has a daughter. Do you go shop? Does she shop there? Have you been there? No? Yeah.
Sorry.
I would never say it. I've seen it in the mall.
Romaine gets his skateboards there, though, right?
That's right. I'm a big Zoomies guy.
Zumiez for the uninformed. Zumiez up about 12% in today's session. Small cap retailer forecasting net sales for the 4th quarter that beat the average of analysts' estimates. B. Riley, by the way, raising its price target to 19 from 18, keeping its neutral rating. The stock, though, above that, 21 and change. Warner Brothers, interesting, top in the S&P 500 and NASDAQ 100 today, despite Goldman downgrading the stock to buy from conviction buy, so a slight downgrade there. No real clue on why it's rallying. New York Post yesterday talking about the CEO, David Zaslav, leaving the door open for ousted ex-CNN head Chris Lick to potentially come back, but I couldn't find any real...
Interesting.
I know. I was reaching. I love the Post. Anyway, Warner Brothers up about 8.4% today, and I got to do an honorable honorable mention for Chipotle, hitting a new record high today.
It's like unstoppable.
I know. RBC raising its price target to $2,425 a share from $21.85. They maintain their perform. That stock, by the way, up 61% year to date and up about 1.4%.
And I just want to add another honorable mention there since we're now doing that. But I thought it was interesting to see all the real estate stocks that really get a strong bid. You had Vornado up like 14% here on the day. And I was taking a look at the Bloomberg office property index that we have on the terminal, 14% gain on the week. And I guess that's directly tied to that massive drop in rates. Bailey?
Yeah, no, I think that's the big driver. And looking to the downside, though, worst performer in the S&P 500, Pfizer down more than 5%, wiping out over $8 billion in market cap. This coming after they scrapped their twice-a-day weight loss pill. Study showed a chunk of patients dropping out, things like nausea, vomiting, driving them to get out of that area and stop studying the twice-a-daily pill. They will continue studying a once-daily pill, but when you look at it, Pfizer down more than 40% year-to-date, guys. That compares to a 48% rally for Novo Nordisk and a 60% jump for Eli Lilly, who are absolutely dominating with the Ozempic, Wegovy, Zepbound, Mounjaro, those shots that pretty much everyone on social media is trying to get their hands on. Pfizer right now, seeming like a big loser after stopping that study.
You know, I just want to mention a quick decliner as well. It's Starbucks, although, like Carol, I'm not sure what's going on here. 10th day of losses for Starbucks? Have you guys noticed this? The longest losing streak since 2008.
That is kind of interesting. I don't know.
There's some labor problems, but I don't think that's the reason.
I don't know. What is it up?
Well, we were talking about that earlier on the program here. I mean, because when you look at just kind of the biggest names that have been dropping over the last a few days and weeks here, like I said, no real news on it, but again, it gives you some sense here of the sentiment in rotation.
Yeah, exactly. Some rotation moving around here. All right, so where do we want to go?
Well, let's we have to talk about yields because that was really obviously the tail wagging the dog, particularly on the short end of the curve, and that massive drop that we saw on the 2-year yield, not only on the day, if you can put that up on the screen, but on a weekly basis as well. We talk about what it basically amounts to about a 13 basis point drop on the 2-year on the day. We're down something like 36-ish basis points on the week, and we're down about 60 basis points since we had we're at that record high, or not record high, 17-year high, I should say, that we hit back in mid-October on the 2-year yield. So it's not just the flip-flop in sentiment, but it's just how fast. I mean, as one of our old colleagues, Taylor Riggs, would always say, it's about the rate of change, and the rate of change over the last couple of weeks has been insane.
Well, and it's really impacted the narrative in a big way, right? Like, I just feel like the conversations, although I do feel like that there's a fair amount of questions that are still out there about what happens in 2024. And I think there's still some concerns about maybe a little bit of a recession, or there's a lot of debate, Bailey, I feel like with different guests about how many rate cuts there could be ultimately and when they happen. So I still feel like there's a fair amount of questions out there.
And right now we're seeing the market pricing in 5, which blows my mind for 2024, and a 73% chance.
Talk about a narrative change.
Exactly. Talk about a pivot.
Yeah.
But how many people have we had? I don't know about it on your radio program, but I mean, we were just talking with Christina Hooper at Invesco. We had a couple other guests earlier this week who talked about this idea that you could have a scenario where multiple rate cuts in 2024 are justified, even though economic conditions won't necessarily be awful.
Well, yeah, I mean, it really depends where the Fed wants to go, and Jay Powell continues to stand by that higher for longer narrative, which the market has continued to shrug off, Romaine. So it'll be interesting to see, do we get a recession? Do we see economic tightening and how that plays out? But as you mentioned, you could see some cuts piling up.
What's the thinking? Can I just ask you what's the thinking behind that? That they're saying rate cuts, even though the economy doesn't warrant it?
Well, I think the argument, at least, I mean, I'm just going to quote what Christina was talking about as well as from others, the idea that you have sort of a restrictive policy right now, at least in the way the Fed views it. And the idea is that if they believe that inflation has been tamed, that doesn't necessarily mean that they need to be completely accommodative, but they need to bring it down from restrictive level to a neutral level. And I think their argument is that neutral.
Come on.
How can you trust the reviews you're reading? Introducing FakeSpot by Mozilla.
Just choked up about it.
We talked about R-Star there with Mike McKee, and he said
that's how I feel every time I mention R-Star.
Well, it could be though a little bit of a moving number, right? Like, it's not necessarily, it could be a little bit higher than it's been at 2%. That kind of balance rate of not stimulate.
But isn't that a good thing? I mean, you don't want the Fed to be too rigid. You want them to have some semblance of being able to pivot if they feel like the data or sort of other measures give them a sense
can
here.
you slap Scarlett on the back or
Scarlett
something?
will be
Make
doing
sure
all right.
she's okay.
She'll be fine. Don't worry. We got a whole team of people here.
I'm choked up. I'm choked up over our stock.
We keep a whole medical team around, mainly for me, because God knows I'm just going to have a heart attack any day now. So they're helping Scarlett out right now off camera.
Jeez, don't say that. All right.
I'm just going. Don't worry. I can
Both
I can
of
last.
you
I can
are
last through this
Bloomberg
simulcast.
treasures. Both of you are Bloomberg
Are we?
treasures.
Really?
Yeah.
What's that treasure worth?
Scarlett at least is. All right, guys. Stay healthy, stay careful, be well. We will see you again. That's a wrap. Our cross-platform coverage, radio, TV. I love you guys. Radio, TV, YouTube, Bloomberg Originals. We will see you again next week.